Welcome into this week's edition of the Zoneheads podcast presented by Kevin Crager with LPT Realty. More on him and his great work in a moment. This week's episode is all about NFL win totals, some of the bets that I've already placed, and my favorite plays that I would recommend throughout the course of the league. Also some divisional futures in there as well. Let's get to it. Welcome into the latest edition of the Zoneheads podcast presented by Kevin Crager, our go-to real estate agent, one of the top 25 producing agents in Central Florida. If you need a realtor and you also need one right now that you can trust, Kevin Crager is your guy, and he's going to treat your money like it's his very own. This is the man to go to that has all the experience needed to help you in the home buying process. When it comes to real estate, experience matters. Trust Kevin Crager to guide you every step of the way. Call him at 407-702-4635. Number scrolling at the bottom of the screen for those that are following along on YouTube. If you are listening to this and you are not watching via video, you can do that. Just follow Zoneheads Media on YouTube. You can also check out zoneheadsmedia.com for an array of the podcasts that I am affiliated with, and also a number of our partners, not only Kevin Crager with this show, but also our other partners with In the Zone, which you can hear weekdays from 3 until 6 p.m. on FM 96.9 The Game and streaming on the iHeartRadio app. That right there is the laundry. Now let's get to the nitty-gritty. I have already placed a couple of futures bets in the NFL. I will give you a detail on which bets I have already placed in terms of over-under win totals. And I wanted to comb through some of these division winner futures. I have not placed a bet on any of these. And honestly, for me personally, I don't like to overinvest in the preseason. I'm going to bet so much of this league week to week. And right now, it's really just about refining my process and making sure that I have my head on straight with some of the offseason moves, power ratings going into the upcoming season. And I want to get that done now so that I'm not too blinded by some of the training camp noise and hype. I want to have a good, balanced framework of how I feel about these teams before we get into the emotion of the season. So try and have an opinion that's backed up by numbers in place before we get to the preseason and we start getting hit with all these headlines and hot takes from the various outlets that we listen to. It's easy to get gassed up because everybody's going to have in this industry, you basically have to pick a team. This is like the unwritten rule of preseason NFL predictions. You've got to pick a team that kind of comes out of nowhere. Otherwise, I mean, going on the radio or a podcast and saying, I think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be good this year isn't exactly going to move the needle. So you got to pick a Cardinals or a Panthers or one of those teams. And what ends up happening is you end up getting gassed up on a couple of teams that you have no business getting gassed up on. So creating that sort of foundation of an opinion prior to the, we'll call it the noise season, and all of those headlines that we see come across the screen during training camp. So that's the general idea of me wanting to have this conversation with you and myself right now. Across the AFC, the Houston Texans are favored to win the NFC South. No surprise there, plus 105. I think if you had to place a bet on that, you would just take that now. Jacksonville's at plus 275. Maybe if Liam Cohen is that good in year one, they could push Houston, but Houston is definitely the class of the division. In the AFC North, you have the Ravens at minus 135. They absolutely should win the division, but we know that it's a dogfight every single year in the AFC North. And I would think Cincinnati would be that team that could potentially push them. If they get any sort of support for Joe Burrow defensively, then Cincinnati is going to be dangerous. AFC West has the Kansas City Chiefs at minus 130. I really like the Chargers and the Broncos this year. I think the Chargers at plus 300, Broncos at plus 400 would be more sensible wagers because Kansas City, they lost the Super Bowl. They have that Super Bowl hangover potentially looming, some aging players like Travis Kelce, the O-line not as good with Joe Tooney gone. I'll dig more into them in a moment, but I would definitely not lay the 130 to have them win the AFC West. In the AFC East, it's the Buffalo Bills minus 250. That's a heavy price, but if you had to bet it right now, you would just lay the juice with the Buffalo Bills, because I don't think anybody else is touching them in that division. NFC North has the Lions on top. That one should be a tight race. If J.J. McCarthy is worth his salt, the Vikings at plus 360 is interesting, but the Packers should be damn good as well, plus 275. The Lions at plus 135 to win the division. To me, I would circle that as a good bet. NFC East, the Eagles at minus 145, a little too rich for my blood, especially with the Washington Commanders on the come up at plus 225. Find that to be an interesting one. Deebo Samuel added to the mix. So I don't think the Commanders were a one-hit wonder. I think they're going to be really good again. NFC West, the 49ers at plus 150, favored to win the division. No chance I'm taking that bet right now. They've lost too many pieces. I want to see what that rebuild, kind of a hybrid rebuild, looks like. The Rams at plus 160 to me would be a better bet. The Seahawks at plus 500. The Cardinals at plus 550. The Cardinals could be one of those sneaky teams. I know I just joked about them as possibly being one of those that gets gassed up in the offseason, but I think that division is just sort of up for grabs. So the fact that you have two teams that are 5-1, both the Seahawks and the Cardinals, would not shock me if they won the division this year. NFC South, you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at plus 105. They should be heavier favorites than that, in my opinion. The Falcons break in what is essentially a rookie quarterback in Michael Penix. The Panthers should be better, but I don't see them contending for a division crown. And the Saints, I could not be lower on, and I will detail that in a moment as all right, let's dig into these win totals here. I did some work in the AFC East. I feel like it's the division that I know the best year to year. So I'll start there, and I will tell you as we go along what bets I've actually placed and what I'm just simply advising for you out there. The Buffalo Bills at 11.5 is an over smash, even though that number is really high. They are far and away the best team in the division, a wider gap than ever. In my opinion, all of their heavy hitters are at home this year. Ravens in week 1, the Chiefs in week 9, the Bucks in week 11, the Bengals in week 14, the Eagles in week 17. They're all at home. They're the only team favored to win every game this year as of right now. The Bills lock up the number 1 seed. You can get that at plus 270. I think that's an even better look. The Miami Dolphins, this is a tough one to land on. The schedule is fairly easy. Outside of the requisite Buffalo road game, their toughest road game outside of that is Atlanta, Pittsburgh, maybe if they get a quarterback. I can see where the odds makers got this number at 8.5. The Dolphins sliding just past that 8.5 mark would not surprise me, but you're probably going to be sweating some games out in the cold of the winter with Tua at the Jets, at the Steelers, at the Patriots. Those might not be the toughest games in the world, but for Tua they are, because a couple of them are in division and all of them will be freezing, and that's in 3 of the final 5 weeks of the season. But it all comes down to Tua's health and just how much of a locker room cancer Tyreek Hill is. Tua missed 6 games last year. They still won 8, even with that being the case. So much unknown with that football team, but if Tua is healthy, they should get at least 9 wins this year. The Pats at 7.5, one of my favorite under plays. I got it about a month ago at 8.5. Should still be some of those out there. They are so overhyped. I love Drake May, but you're asking them to more than double their win total from last season. And why? Because they added Stephon Diggs. They added a couple of pieces on defense. They got a new coach. They could win 7 games. And that would be a massive improvement for them, and they would still hit the under. Power rating wise, they were the 5th worst team in the NFL last year. Their schedule is soft, 3rd best strength of schedule, not enough to get me to the over. And I really like Drake May, and I do think this Patriots team is going to be better, but this is going to be one of those teams. I talk about getting gassed up right before the season starts. Watch the Patriots. They are going to be that team that people project to be, this will be the Commanders of 2025. I think it's way too strong. The Jets at 5.5, a slight lean to the under here. That is, they have a manageable schedule, but Justin Fields is just simply not a winning quarterback. 17-33 in his career as a starter. Now they're coached by a first-year coach in Aaron Glenn who leans defense, and we learned last year that this roster is not as talented as we all thought it was. I wouldn't touch it, though, mainly because I think Buffalo will have their seeding locked up by Week 18 when they finish the season against one another. And if the Jets are sitting at 5 wins at that point and they play a Bills team that has whoever their backup is, Mitch Trubisky or whatever, in for Josh Allen because the Bills don't need to play their starters, I'm not trying to lose my bet on that. So I will not touch it. One that I have placed, and I put about 3 units on this one, is the Saints under 6.5 wins. This was juiced when I bought it. It was somewhere in the range of minus 160. It's at minus 185 now. I still think it's worth a bet. Just take a couple of bucks out of your savings and responsibly and throw it on this. Just let it sit there all season. The Saints have no interest in winning football games. Derek Carr retired. Tyler Shuck was okay in college, and now they're going to trot him out there as their starter, and they're going to act like this is something that they want to do in the effort of winning football games. They do not. They are in a bad cap situation. They need a revitalization. And they have a first-year head coach. He's safe. He can just sort of, manage the youngsters. I think Chris Olave could be a guy that ends up getting traded if they continue to go down this road of tanking. That is exactly what the New Orleans Saints are doing. I wouldn't be surprised if Alvin Kamara was off the roster at some point. They want Arch Manning, okay? Let's just say the quiet part out loud. They had Archie Manning years ago. That was what established them as a relevant franchise. Then fans wore bags over their heads for years until Drew Brees arrived. They want Arch Manning, and they're not touching 7 wins this season. That is just, I just cannot wait to cash that bet when we get to January. I just know it's going to happen. Chiefs under 11.5 is another bet that I have placed. The Super Bowl hangover is real. It's really hard to lose the Super Bowl. It takes so much out of you when you lose the big game and then go into the next year. And we already saw the holes in this team that the Philadelphia Eagles exposed. Offensive line, not that good. Travis Kelce, he's getting up there. Mahomes is great, but we are seeing him come back to the pack a little bit where he's not 7 levels better than the 4 or 5 guys that are behind him in whatever your ranking is for quarterbacks in the NFL. He's still number 1, but that gap is not as wide as it was. So with all of that being the case, and they've had to let go of a couple of key pieces defensively, L'Jarius Sneed a year ago, and 11.5, that is asking a lot of a Chiefs team that's probably going to start slow this year. I'm on the Chargers already, plus 2.5 in week 1. To ask them to win 12 games. They could win 11, have a really good season, make their way back to the playoffs. I'm sure all of that will happen, but under 11.5 to me is a really sharp look. The Steelers at under 8.5. This is not one that I have played yet, but it's one that I am seriously considering. That 8.5 is a pretty ridiculous number. To me, that's a Mike Tomlin tax because he's been an incredible coach and he always seems to get 9 wins. He never finishes below 500. And now with the 17-game season, you have to finish above or below 500, not at 500. And that's Mike Tomlin. He does this every single year, but they don't have a quarterback. They don't have a running back. They're relying on DK Metcalf to be their sole source of offense. And TJ Watt right now is holding out as well. If they don't get Aaron Rodgers, they have no chance of hitting this. And even if they do add Aaron Rodgers, they still might not get to 9 wins. To me, 8.5 under the only way to look. The Giants at under 5.5 wins. Somehow they landed the toughest schedule in the NFL. Don't ask me how. Well, probably their division has a lot to do with it, come to think of it, but they have a lame duck coach in Brian Daboll. They made very little movement on the roster, and they're either going to throw Russell Wilson or Jackson Dart out there. I don't like either of those options. I'm not trying to sit there with an over ticket on the Giants with Russ, who's been completely figured out at this point in the later stages of his career, or Jackson Dart, who was never asked to read a defense based on the way they run their offense at Ole Miss. So under 5.5, the only way to look there. Chargers. Okay, I've given you enough underplays here. Let's have some fun now. The Chargers over 9.5 wins. They went 11-6 last year. Year 1 under Jim Harbaugh, and Harbaugh teams do not regress, not that quickly. So I think they are in line to get even better here. I like the Chargers a lot. I think they're a sneaky play to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. Their receiving core was young and inexperienced last year. They should get a bump up with time and seasoning in the NFL. And they beefed up the running back room as well. They add Najee Harris. They add Omarion Hampton out of UNC. They're going to be a much better running team, a much more durable running team. They were trying to work with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, two guys that cannot stay on the field last year. This is going to look much more like Harbaugh football, and they're at least going to win 10 games. Panthers, I like their over at 6.5 wins. They started playing really well down the stretch, and they did that without J.C. Horn in the lineup. He didn't play from prior to Christmas on. And he's one of the top 3 cover corners in the league. So that's a huge addition for a team that started to put it together without him in the lineup. Add Tet McMillan in the draft, a true vertical threat, which they have not had. Dave Canales, I think, is building something there. I could see them pushing for 7 to 8 wins, potential wild card in the NFC. The Bucks, since they'll finish out with the in-state teams, just in case you wanted to hear a little love for those squads or a little bit of a breakdown. For the record, before I wrap on that, to be clear, the only teams that I have placed a dollar on are the Patriots under 7.5, or I got them at under 8.5 wins for the Patriots, the Saints at under 6.5, and the Chiefs at under 11.5. I am seriously debating the Steelers. That might happen soon. And I'm also seriously debating just betting the Miami Dolphins over 8.5 wins and then not touching them for the entire season. Perhaps putting 4 units down on the Dolphins over so that I don't bet them all season, because the last thing you want to do, okay, let this be your very important, this will be the most important betting advice I've given out in the entire episode so far. Never bet with your heart, ever. Your heart is stupid. Bet with your mind, okay? You're a big sports fan. You know what you're looking at. You bet with your heart, and it'll lead you astray. It'll also hurt more when you lose, so keep that in mind. So if you have a team that you ride or die with that team, just bet their season total over, and then don't touch them all season. The Bucks, I think the only way to look for Tampa Bay is the over at 9.5, but you're just not getting any value with that number because they're going to sit right there between 9 and 10 wins. And that line is it's set perfectly. They might sneak past it again. They should. Their schedule is middle of the road in terms of difficulty, and they benefit from playing at a very weak NFC South. It's much of the same guys that you had last year. So there's no reason to think that they're going to slide backwards. I think anybody who takes that position is just trying to be a contrarian. But them sitting at 9 wins and a potential division lead at the end of the season is not outside of the realm of possibility. So I want no part of that. The Jags, I think the only way to look to me is the under. They have a new coach, breaking in Travis Hunter, both sides of the ball. We have no idea what that's going to look like. I'd be surprised if they got past this. They still need so much work defensively. They were one of the worst defensive teams in the league last year, and I don't think they did enough to improve that. But hopefully Trevor can show us something. I would like to see my prediction for the season, and it's hard for both of these to happen, but it's possible, is the Jaguars win a very encouraging 7 games. They miss out on the playoffs, but you can feel something building, and Trevor Lawrence plays at a Pro Bowl level, like that initial Pro Bowl team, not the one that's invited because nobody actually wants to go. That does it for this week's edition of the Zoneheads podcast, presented by Kevin Crager with LPT Realty. Call him at 407-702-4635 and follow me across all platforms at Brandon Kravitz. Also, check out my website, zoneheadsmedia.com, and we'll chat next week.